Welcome to the Digital Marketing Insights podcast, brought to you by Brightside Digital.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to say we have Saoirse with us today, who's the Director of Marketing and Public Relations. Saoirse, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. I'm delighted to be on. So thank you for having me, Thomas. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Saoirse, we start off the show the same as always. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, please?
Definitely. So, as you can probably tell from my accent, which hopefully does not come across too painful on recording, I am a Cork woman, born and raised in Cork City. And I studied both my undergrad degree and my master's degree in UCC. Initially, when I finished my Leaving Cert, I thought that I would pursue a career that would be in academia. I'm very passionate about history, and that's kind of initially where I saw myself going. So I completed a bachelor's degree in history and political science. And then after, I was also working and I really became interested in marketing. And I was very fortunate then to have secured a place in the MSc Master's program, which is in Management and Marketing in UCC. So I completed that for a year. And I guess that is really where my, formal and official journey began working in marketing. My entire career has been in the drinks and hospitality industry. I started working in bars at a very young age. And I really enjoyed the fast paced nature of working in that environment. I really enjoyed the social aspect. I, quickly began working, putting together events, different experiential activations. And of course, when you work in bars and restaurants, you have a lot of exposure to brands. And it's always really interesting to collaborate with local brands, whether they be big or small, and they're always coming to you looking to collaborate on events. So it was from here, from that role, and combined with doing my master's in marketing, that I was so lucky to secure an internship working with Irish distillers, Pernod Ricard, otherwise, as everyone would know, the brand as Jameson. So the brand Jameson which is what I was working on. But they're part of a larger corporation called Pernod Ricard. In Ireland, they trade as Irish distillers, and they own a lot of other exciting, well-known brands such as Absolute Vodka, Malibu, etc. So after my master's, I started an internship, which I only thought would last 6 months, which I was very grateful to have secured. And I actually ended up staying with Pernod Ricard for almost 6 years, working with them in Ireland. And then I transferred to the US. I was based in Los Angeles, California. And now I am back in Ireland. And as Thomas said, I am the marketing and PR director for Cork Heritage Pubs and Rising Suns Brewery. And yeah, I just relocated back almost 6 months ago, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously it's brilliant to have such talent back in Ireland, I'd like to say, starting off. But
Thank
Saoirse,
you.
you're welcome. Saoirse, I suppose one of the main areas then I'd like to focus on is what would you see as your main skill set in marketing now and public relations?
That is a great question. I would say that my biggest skill set would probably be relationship building. I know that may sound like a very generic term, but especially with regards to public relations, that role really is to very much engage in the community in a meaningful and authentic way. Public relations is honestly, it's a very vast spectrum and it includes a lot. But I would say my greatest strength would be in relationship building and being able to maintain and develop relationships with people that we can be involved in business both directly and indirectly. So I think that
And
would probably be my biggest strength.
how would you go about outreach and just correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, but would that be in the lines of journalists, publications, different businesses that might be aligning to the business you're working for? I suppose in your industry, it's distilleries or chains or pubs or things like that. So that kind of thing. Could you give me a little example of how you'd go about outreaching and building those relationships?
Definitely. So I think one of the easiest ways for anyone starting off in their career, and if they're working in PR, is attending industry related events, going there and networking with other people in your field that are representing other companies. I think collaboration in business is so powerful across all different departments. And we're very lucky because we authentically, I guess, or sorry, organically, we would have these opportunities come to us to collaborate. One of the most recent partnerships that we had was with Cork Pride, and that was a very successful and interesting project to work on. I know sometimes it can be a little bit controversial when you're a business and you can be involved in something that is perceived to be political, because people will always have opinions, and some of the backlash one may face is, oh, you're not normally an LGBTQ corporation, and now they could maybe have a negative viewpoint of you're trying to, profit off a minority, etc. But we worked very closely with Cork Pride to make sure that all of our communications going forward were done in a respectful, authentic, and a real way. So that was one interesting collaboration that we had with regards to like the PR side of my job. And yeah, there was a lot of engagement with working with journalists, the press. It definitely can be tricky to navigate, as you really do not have very much control with regards to what they will print. You can give as much information as possible, but unfortunately, sometimes it can be used to suit an agenda. I do apologize if this comes across as being negative. It is absolutely not. I just think with PR, it's just very good to be thorough
Yeah.
and to definitely consult with other professionals or people you're involved with, just to ensure that the communications that go forward are very consistent and true to the message that you're trying to get across.
Yeah. And that's completely understandable. And you mentioned their events. So I get the impression you're a very outgoing person. So you would you would easily make connections at events. How would you say for someone that might be a bit more introvert? Do you have any tips or anything? And this is probably more of a personality thing of how people can put themselves out of comfort zones to network at these kind of events.
No, that's a brilliant question. And also, thank you for the compliment. It is really hard. Even for myself, I am a very confident and outgoing person, but as you progress in your career and your development in general, you are going to be placed in uncomfortable situations, and they can be the most rewarding for growth. For example, I relocated to Los Angeles 5 years ago. I moved over there by myself. I was very lucky that I did have a job secured, and that is what brought me over there. But so many times I had to attend events completely on my own, and it is very, very nerve wracking. But I think when you're in a professional environment, I think it's important to remind yourself that people are there from the same purpose. People are there because they're interested in growth, they're interested in networking, learning something new. And I think by going to some local events and kind of starting small within your community and bringing someone with you, or kind of teaming up with someone, can definitely be very helpful, because it can be a very intimidating situation, especially when you're starting out. And also, having a mentor can be just so invaluable to these things, and getting to go with someone and shadow people to see how they interact in certain situations, that would be the advice I would give.
Yeah, really good advice. And before we move on, there is one thing I noticed from your profile and one of your images, and I have to ask. You look like you met Oprah Winfrey. How was she, and how did that connection happen?
Oh, that's such a funny question. Yes, so that is my claim to fame. I had a very short-lived 30 minutes of fame, which I tell you, I was actually initially very not happy about. This is actually a very important tip for everyone that's listening. If your social media is on private, any publication can actually use your image and print without your consent, because it's your fault for having it on public. I was not aware of that when I posted my picture. I went to sleep, and with the time difference, when I woke up, I saw that I had significant media coverage in Ireland about the fact that, yes, I met Oprah Winfrey. So it's a funny story. I was attending a charity event on behalf of the brand that I was representing at the time. And it was in one of my accounts, which I had a very good relationship with. And they had asked me to donate some product and help out with the event. I personally envisioned myself, you know, actually serving drinks and, helping greet people. I thought, I was volunteering essentially. But they assured me, no, we want you to dress up and, attend. Please bring another one of your colleagues. So I was absolutely delighted. And when we went to the event, of course, Oprah Winfrey arrived. And I got the biggest shock of my life when we were seated down at dinner. Somebody was kicking me under the table. I looked to my left and she actually had sat next to me. And that was unbelievable. It was very nerve wracking. Initially, I was just shocked. I remember my legs shaking. I said, "This is absolutely surreal. I'm from Cork. Why is Oprah Winfrey sitting next to me at an event? This is very strange." But yeah, she was lovely. She was very down to earth. Um, I was just trying my best to be as respectful as possible. And my strategy was speak when spoken to, do not annoy her. It must be so exhausting being her and having people going over just, asking for advice and talking to her. But I was very grateful that she let me get a photograph with her. And how I pitched it to her was I said, "Look, Oprah, I'm really sorry for asking. I hope this is not invasive. But I'm from Ireland and nobody will believe me that not only did I see you at an event, but the fact you're sitting next to me at dinner. So can I please have a photo for proof for my nana?" And she said, of course, and she thought it was funny. And yeah, it was great. But that definitely was a career highlight for me, I have to say.
That's brilliant. So yeah, that's how well connected you are, I suppose, at your work. You know Oprah, so I think you win for a
Oh,
connection.
I
So
wish I wouldn't say that's a bit of an exaggeration there now, but I'll take it.
yeah, and moving on to kind of your career and some of the campaigns you've worked on, is there any campaign you're really proud of, and how did you make it successful?
That is a great question. I mean, we have a lot of partnerships and a lot of smaller campaigns that we have done that have been very successful. I think a lot of the projects that I have worked on have very much been hyper local, really engaging kind of in a grassroots and authentic way with the community. And I think that those campaigns always have had the most success because they're a bit more relatable, and you know that it's done by someone who lives and who's involved in the city rather than kind of it being advertised or rolled out on like a big large level. I think in from Rising Suns Brewery, I was very much involved in the pre-planning stage, and I led a lot of the market research and project management. And a lot of the events that we did, like we tried to keep them as Cork as possible. As I'm sure you are aware, us Cork people were very proud and nationalistic about our Cork heritage. So just having, a lot of events that would tie in with ongoing activities in the city and just making sure that all of our branding and messaging is also very Cork. And yeah, that is, I guess, one success that I've had.
It's really clever that you guys are quite micro and localize your market. I can imagine it's all about trying to understand who you're marketing to and building out campaigns, knowing that your target audience a lot of the time for something like that is Cork.
Yes, exactly. And we've had a lot of success with that. And I think a lot of brands, even global brands, they do try that strategy as well. I know that when I was with Jameson, we very much try to engage at a more grassroots level. And one example of that is we actually did a multicultural campaign, as there was a very significant and large Latino population that live in California. So we actually developed a campaign just to engage with that demographic. And that was something that we had a lot of success with.
That's incredible. And obviously, looking at your work a little bit more, is there any particular softwares you use that might improve your work?
So, yeah, working in hospitality and the drinks industry, we are, I guess, different to other digital marketing teams because we're not necessarily trying to get leads or work kind of by selling B2B. So, I mean, a lot of the tools that I just use is basic built-in software that exists within some social channels, such as Facebook Meta Business, Instagram Analytics is very handy. Um, but another interesting one is actually Sprinkler. And Sprinkler is a software that is basically designed to trace your brand online and see across all socials what people are saying about it, what people are posting about it, so that you can really get more of a deeper insights into, I guess, consumer behavior, but also, like, I guess, your brand's perception. And that can be something really interesting. I find that that's a very helpful tool for brands.
I love that you've mentioned Sprinkler, and it's definitely been mentioned on the show before. How so? I've recently used it for another business, and I used the Sprout Social equivalent of it. Now, what we found difficult is we kind of quickly realized the industry itself isn't spoken enough in the Irish market, like some the rest of the world market, because these tools can go geo. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily have experienced that with Jameson because it's so well known worldwide. But do you have any tips or hints around social listening? And for anyone that probably doesn't understand, just go a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, this is a bit more time consuming, but what I do find is just even, this sounds so obvious that maybe it's not helpful, but I find even just going into Instagram and going into the location and seeing, have people just put up a post there where they might not have mentioned it in the text, or have people been, referencing it just on Instagram in, I guess, indirect ways, because sometimes people aren't going to necessarily always use a hashtag or the word. For example, they could say, went to a great brewery in Cork yesterday, but Sprinkler might not have actually picked up on that because they didn't mention the name. But on Instagram, I can see just by who has checked in on the location.
Brilliant. Yeah, really good tip. I actually don't think that's ever been mentioned before in the show as well, around just using social media as almost a search tool, like a Google search for what people are saying about your brand and business.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of really keeping an eye on like the DMs, and obviously engaging is very powerful. People love to see their stories be reposted. People like if you like a post that they have put up like in your bar or about your brand. I think that can be very powerful as well, because people, it's a very generic term that we always say in marketing is, people like to engage with people, not brands. And if your
Yes.
brand or your venue has a bit of a personality, it definitely creates more of a positive association, because people really kind of feel like they're connecting to that place or brand.
Really well said. And Saoirse, away from your career work, I suppose, your day to day, is there any areas you're looking to upskill into? And also, is there any insights or anywhere you look for new information?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, honestly, there is so many different areas that I would love to upskill in. I think definitely photography, just editing, videography. I mean, a big part of my job is content creation, so that's why I did choose to mention this as the kind of skills that I would just love to be a lot more developed in. I just feel like in general, the industry standard is so high across content. I think before, even businesses that wouldn't really generically have invested in, content creation, they're now hiring videographers, photographers. I feel like the standard is incredibly high. And that is something that I would love to be better at. And especially as socials are always changing, TikTok is the new Instagram. I personally am not a TikTok user, so that is something that I kind of want to keep up with. I think one of the easiest ways to keep up with trends is actually just talking to people. I'm very fortunate that I have sisters we've quite a large age gap. So my youngest sister is 13 and I'm almost 30, and so it's like a 15-year age gap. And I've often asking her, like, how do your friends connect? What kind of content do kids these days follow or like and engage with? And, just by kind of staying relevant, and it is always changing. I also heard a really interesting phrase recently saying that people are suffering from what is called content fatigue. I think it's a good term, and I don't know if anyone else can relate, but sometimes it can be exhausting when you're scrolling on Instagram and everyone just has this, very curated content, whether it be people, influencers, businesses, or brands. And it can sometimes just be a bit much. So I am very interested to see what the future of content creation holds, because I do believe that there is a bit of a backlash, I guess, about these perfectly curated posts that aren't always, very authentic to some people, or that seem very staged. So that is just kind of some new information that I picked up recently that I found fascinating.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'd love to echo that. I think you're spot on with that. I've been doing a good bit of work in TikTok. The one thing I know from my TikTok usage is, obviously I'm heavy in digital. Obviously, this podcast with yourself, but a lot of my TikTok feed isn't anything related to my career work.
No, definitely. And I mean, there is so much information out there about, I guess, cracking the code of the algorithm in TikTok and Instagram. And yeah, it is very interesting. And yeah, it can be frustrating at times, especially if you accidentally, click on something. And then, as you mentioned, your entire feed is around a certain type of content that's not necessarily what you are interested in.
Yeah, and quality will always rise to the top. I think great content, no matter what the genre or theme. Hence, why you're probably interested in your photography and videography and trying to improve those areas. Lastly, digital industry as a whole. Is there anything that you think would be a big game changer that might be coming down the pipeline?
That's a really interesting question. You know, Not that I could, the only thing that comes to mind would be more just, I guess, the social aspect. And I think from what I've read, and I read a very interesting article on Forbes, and it was talking about the death of the influencer and how people are actually backlashing against this. I don't personally know enough about it to have an opinion on it, but I think it's really interesting that, there could be just another way of affiliate marketing, influencer marketing. I guess a few years ago when we were growing up, celebrity endorsement and marketing was huge. And then they kind of moved away from that. And then it really all became about the influencer, and these new celebrities were created. But I think socially, people are becoming more aware, and people are starting to be more mindful with their consumption. So influencer marketing, it's interesting. I think that would be my only thing that I could see as being
Yeah.
possibly disruptive. And that's from, just articles that I've read from reputable sources. But I also think I've observed it myself, as I mentioned in like my previous comment about the content fatigue phenomenon that people have been discussing. I think people are just getting tired because, certain ways of selling and perhaps celebrities or influencers, they're just kind of unrelatable and a little bit out of touch. And I think that that could be really disruptive in the digital space.
And how do you think that marketplace will play out? Just your opinion. It doesn't have to be backed by anything. But do you see people shifting away from influencers and maybe going to? I suppose traditionally you could rely on things like the Times or the Independent or stuff, big, or National Geographic or something else, Vogue, like these big publication stuff as the spokespeople at those places, because they're kind of vetted and checked, and a lot of their work is looked into. Do you think we'll revert back to that's where people go, news source, rather than single bodied people like influencers, as you mentioned?
That is a great question. And I think your suggestion, yeah, could be very true. But I also think that there's more of a rise of what you could call like the micro influencer. I think people I mean, it goes back to, I guess, the influencer, how it became a thing in general, is that people felt like they were more relatable than celebrities. But as the influencer market has become, I guess, very repetitive and large and dominate social media, I think people are kind of, just getting a bit tired of it. So I think that there's a lot of value in micro influencers. Another interesting quote that I read recently was that it was that following does not always equal influence. I think that's really interesting. I think we all may know someone who, in real life could possibly be very well connected or well liked in a certain community or environment, but that might not necessarily transpire online. So I think people will just kind of, go back to smaller, more relatable influencers or publications that have credibility. I think people are definitely questioning things. And yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I have no idea how it will play out.
Lastly, Saoirse, we try and understand the people behind the role a little bit more. And I always ask this question, which is, if you could bottle up one personality trait you have yourself and you could pass it on to others, what would it be?
I would say openness. I think that in Ireland and the UK that we have more of a culture of indirect communication, and I definitely pride myself on being very open and transparent. And I think that that's actually crucial for a work environment because people's expectations are met and there isn't this element of things being overcomplicated. So I think definitely my openness, which can be a flaw sometimes because maybe I'm too open and not as tactical as I could be, but that would be the one quality that I would choose for myself.
What a wonderful answer. And what a wonderful way to end the show. Saoirse, thank you so much for being interviewed. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much.